y'all, Kakarot197 again, and with the upcoming Western release of Gundam Versus on the PlayStation 4, I'm sure everyone is impatiently waiting for that. So to make the wait a bit more bearable, let's have a look at 5 awesome Gundam games you've probably never played, to play in the meantime. There are only 2 rules I use for making this list, and that is 1, they have to be pure Gundam games. So no crossover games like Super Robot Tyson, also known as Super Robot Wars. And 2, as the title suggests, they can be games everyone already knows about and therefore has played. So nothing like the aforementioned Versus series on this list. Now, due to the nature of this list, all 5 games are in Japanese, but they are all playable by non-Japanese speakers to various degrees, which I will get into. Number 5, the Mobile Suit Gundam side story, The Blue Destiny Trilogy for the Sega Saturn. When I'm talking about an awesome Gundam game on a Sega console, most of you will, rightfully so, think about Rise from the Ashes on the Dreamcast, but I'm here to talk about a much more obscure game. By now, I'm sure most people are familiar with Blue Destiny, but with the original games being on the Saturn and never being released outside of Japan, I doubt many of you have given this amazing trilogy a shot, at least in its original version. Now, upon booting up the game, you'll notice that the main menu is completely in English, making the barrier of entry into this game extremely low. What also helps is that most of the missions are extremely straightforward. Destroy all the things. And for a console that's so notoriously difficult to program for, all these things are very pretty to look at, with nicely detailed environments for the time. The biggest draw for this game is no doubt the fast-paced action. You start off with a gym command which is adequate for Zaku's, but once the DOMs pop up, you'll really be fighting for your life. Fortunately, you upgrade to the Blue Destiny Unit 1 and later on Unit 3, both of which are dreams to pilot, whether it's the extremely responsive controls or deciding on the best moment to unleash your missiles. Combine the speed of your unit with the speed of the enemies and you get an action-packed game that will have you coming back for more until the game ends, which is unfortunately pretty soon depending on the difficulty you select. Each game has 5 missions which can be finished in 3 minutes if you're either really good or select easy. So unless you want the experience to end in less than an hour, I highly recommend you to give the hard mode a shot. Finally, the story is told through Japanese text before the mission and cutscenes using in-game graphics. So even without knowing Japanese, these cutscenes will at least give you some idea of what is going on. Starting with the second game, there are also the talking heads in the mission briefings to make things just a little bit more aesthetically pleasing. In summary, I can highly recommend these games to anyone. Are they worth buying a Sega Saturn for? Maybe. The Sega Saturn has a lot of other great Japan-only games, so if you can find a few other games that might interest you, you could buy yourself a Saturn, the Blue Destiny games, and those other few games. Or if you already have an American or a European Saturn, you can simply buy yourself an Action Replay to make your console region-free. Either way, it is worth considering. Number 4. Mobile Suit Gundam F91 Formula Report 0122 for the Super Famicom, also known as the Super Nintendo in the West. Now, F91 is a pretty unique game, with the closest game that I can think of being Kido Senshi Gundam Seed Tomo to Kimi to Senjo de, which you've probably never played either. F91's gameplay is divided into a few parts. Before the mission starts, you get to choose the equipment for your F90 Gundam, and no, that's not a mistake, you mainly play this game as the F90 Gundam, and then you'll be presented with an overhead view of the battlefield, where the game plays like a turn-based strategy game, but you only control your own Gundam. Once you make contact with an enemy machine, the real battle commences. You have to lock onto the enemy as fast as possible by getting them in your range with the D-pad and the shoulder buttons, and then ramming the A button as fast as possible to enter the weapon selection screen. Then you can choose how you want to kill your enemy. The weapons at your disposal are divided into 3 classes: short, mid, and long range, but other than that, the game tells you nothing about how strong or accurate these weapons are, resulting in the combat feeling random at times. The same randomness occurs when an enemy attacks you. The attack just happens, and whether it lands or not is entirely up to the RNG gods. Making things worse is that while you're struggling to hit anything, the other enemies on the battlefield are still on the move, making a beeline for your mothership, and when that thing gets destroyed, it's game over. This unique combat system is really going to be the deciding factor for your enjoyment of this game. I quite enjoyed it with the help of the great soundtrack and animation, but I'll admit that I think a lot of people will see it as boring, random, and unfair. And I would say rightfully so. The game's story is told through dialogue with some accompanying visuals. Sufficient to say, unless you speak Japanese or download an English patch, the story is going to be completely lost on you. The mission objectives, however, couldn't be simpler. Every mission involves you shooting down absolutely everything with a little bit of help from the RNG gods. And by a little bit, I mean a lot. So it's sufficient to say, before rushing off and buying this game, I would say try emulating it first. Number 3. Gundam Seed Destiny for the Game Boy Advance. Before we talk about the actual game itself, we must look at another 2D fighting game. On August 10, 2004, America got Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Battle Assault for the Game Boy Advance. It featured 12 playable mobile suits, 4 of which had to be unlocked, but unfortunately, the game didn't have a battery backup. So instead, you got a password, which you had to re-enter every time you booted up the game. Fortunately, the game at least offered a nice variety of things to do, such as the normal mode, which is basically the arcade mode, survival mode, free battle mode, time trial mode, time limit mode, training mode, and a versus mode, for if you have a friend who also owns the game. A few months later, however, on November 25th, 2004, Japan would get a game titled simply Mobile Suit Gundam Seed Destiny. The game was essentially an upgraded version of the US-only Battle Assault. It featured twice as many mobile suits, and instead of having to use a password, we now have a battery backup. And in the menu, the password option was replaced by a shop selling a variety of things. More practical things such as mobile suits, different pilots for the suits, or new backgrounds. Then the more cosmetic items were things such as a selectable Player 2 color for a suit, or different outfits for Lakas, different shopkeepers altogether, and things like that. Sometimes, if you're lucky, or you just enter the store enough times, you can enter the secret store of Murata Azrael, which allows you to buy the hardest to unlock mobile suits for a pretty penny. The final small change is that the normal mode is now renamed to main mode, and most importantly of all, Marin is now the operator, something I highly approve of. The US unfortunately really got the short end of the stick here, with their version feeling more like the beta version of the Japanese version. And oddly enough, the Japanese version allows you to choose to play either the Japanese version or the US version, with passwords and all. But on to the gameplay, which is identical for both versions, although the US version does feel slightly more difficult. All the mobile suits feel distinct and mostly represent how you would expect them to play, and while the game isn't as complex as other fighting games, it does do a great job of translating Gundam Seed Destiny to a 2D fighter. And it's also this simplicity that makes it a great pick up and play game for just about anyone. It also does a great job at including other features from Gundam Seed Destiny, such as phase shift armor and activating Seed for a special attack. A little bit of attention to detail that go a long way into making this a very enjoyable game and is absolutely worth your time. The menus, just as in the English version, are all in English, and the story of the arcade mode, or main mode, makes about as much sense as the stories in other fighting games, which is absolutely none. So even if you would understand Japanese, it's still mainly gibberish. So if you own a Game Boy Advance, you owe it to yourself to buy this game and play it. And if you don't own a Game Boy Advance, I am 100% certain that the device you're watching this video on can run a Game Boy Advance emulator. Number 2. Lost War Chronicles for the PlayStation 2. With a name like this, I simply could not leave this game off the list. With the large amount of English released PlayStation 2 games, this game truly has become lost. It might not be the prettiest game on the PlayStation 2, but fortunately, looks are only skin deep, as we're getting a really fun and unique game. As the opening suggests, when we get to the menu, it's all in English, and the same goes for the mobile suit selection screen, except for one option. But by process of elimination, I think you can figure out what it means. It's also really cool that you get to choose your machines in an actual hangar as opposed to a boring selection screen. Great little attention to detail there. And not only can you pick your own suit and weapon, but also those of your 2 wingmen. Of course, as you progress the story and kick the enemy's ass, you'll unlock more and better goodies. Believe me, this game has a lot of suits to choose from. One thing I also thoroughly enjoyed was that this game not just offers you the regular third-person view, but also offers you a cockpit view. Unfortunately, when you get into the cockpit view, you don't have any details of the actual cockpit. It's just an empty screen. They could have made it a little bit better, but it's still really cool to have the option, especially since not a lot of Gundam games have the choice between the two. The controls are similar to Journey of the Burrow, except better, and since you have 2 wingmen, there's also a streamlined function to give them quick commands on the fly. It all works really well together, and combine that with the fact that your mobile suits are pretty quick on their feet, especially when boosting, and you get a game that is an absolute joy to control. One really cool feature in my mind was that destroyed mobile suits have a pretty big explosion that will actually damage you, similar to what we saw in the beginning of the first Gundam series, meaning that you will either have to pull up your shield or get the hell away from that thing before it blows up. It's a really cool feature that makes the battles just this little bit more intense. The story is told entirely through your cute comms officer, available in Federation or Xeon flavor, telling you what's going on before each mission. Other than that, there are no story-related cutscenes. Essentially, by knowing your Gundam history and by looking at where the mission is taking place, you'll kinda know what's going on. The cutscenes you can get, however, are unlocked by performing well in the game and unlocking new mobile suits. Essentially, the character in the scene will congratulate you on your performance and will offer you their mobile suit. Or something else.
あなたは適当にくつろいでいってくれていいからね。
Moving on. Lost War Chronicles really has a bit of everything. Action, team play, great controls, awesome soundtrack, fan service, etc. And with the simple mission objectives and English menus, this is a game that just about any Gundam fan can pick up and play. I highly recommend anyone to play this game immediately by any means, after we have a look at the next and final entry on this list, of course. Number 1. Giren's Greed, Thread of Axis, for the PSP or PS2. There are many Giren's Greed games, but I specifically chose to cover Thread of Axis for the PSP for 2 main reasons. The first is that being on the PSP means that it is the easiest to get and play, with the PSP being both region-free and easy to mod. Secondly, Thread of Axis is the most expansive game of the bunch, covering events from the One-Year War all the way up to Char's counterattack. The only trade-off being that the animated cutscenes were all replaced by still images. One very important thing to mention is that despite being called Giran's Greed, you can actually choose from 14 different factions, and one extra bonus faction if you have Thread of Axis V. Once you choose who you want to be, it's time to jump into this massive strategy game. The main gameplay is divided into two parts. You have the map screen where all the planning takes place. You can do research for new units, spy on the enemy, do political things, construct units at your bases, send troops around, plan your attacks, and much more. The second part of your turn is the combat phase. You play 5 turns of every ongoing battle, and if you don't finish a battle, don't worry, it will continue on in your next turn. Because of this system, you can and will have multiple battles going on at once. Combined with being at a distinct disadvantage no matter which faction you choose, Giran's Greed is a pretty rough game with a high learning curve. However, it's exactly this unique combat system and the toughness that makes it such a rewarding challenge to fight through. Unlike most strategy games, you're not fighting every battle to win. On one front, you'll have your main force, while on the other front, you'll just be trying to buy time and stalling the enemy forces and preventing them from linking up with the enemies your main force is dealing with. The ability to send reinforcements to these battle zones can also change the tide of the battle in an instant. A mop-up operation can turn deadly when the enemy's main force suddenly pops up, or vice versa. This massive scale is what truly makes Giran's Greed not just a fantastic Gundam game, but an epic game in general. The story is unexpectedly more in the background. If you're playing as a faction from an anime, you will follow the general story through a handful of quote-unquote cutscenes, and you'll be forced to take the enemy bases in the same order as the anime. But that's about it. However, the real meat lies with the what-if scenarios. What if Ramaral defeated the White Base? What if Zeon won the war? What if the Titans won the Grips conflict? Or even better, what if Revel survived the 1-year war, joined with the Titans, and helped them to victory under his guidance, essentially turning them into Londo Bell? Am I spouting nonsense? Nope. All of these things and much, much more are possible in Giran's Greed. If you win the war with a faction that lost in the anime, you will get an alternate ending where your faction actually won, turning Giran's Greed into every Gundam fan's wet dream. Especially if you're the kind of fan whose favorite faction lost a war. So what the hell is keeping you from picking up this game right now? Oh yeah, the menus. The large amount of menus, all in Japanese. The best advice I can give you here is to consult an online menu translation. I'll have some links in the description down below to the ones that I've used. It's gonna be hard, but oh so worth it. Still, because of the difficulty, I won't tell you to immediately go out and buy it, but by all means, give it a shot and bring glory to your favorite faction, and make the leader of that faction proud. And that's all for this video. Have you played any of these games, and what did you think of them? Or maybe you have some hidden Gundam gems of your own. And finally, are you all looking forward to the upcoming Versus game? As for me, I don't have a PlayStation 4 yet, so I guess I'll just go play some Blue Destiny on my Saturn. Anyways, be sure to subscribe for more Gundam content, and see you all next time.